Naila, why is English language important to learn?
This is because English language is an international language and is widely followed and understood by people across the world.
I want to learn this language.
To learn every language, there are some skills to develop. Follow this class to learn these skills.
We welcome you once again, our viewers, to our program, English Language. If this is your first time to be with us, try not to miss the program again. It is only on this channel, MTA Africa. It is an English lesson, series of English lesson program that brings to us the various ways of studying the English language. It's just a simple guide to guide us, those of us writing examination, both internal and external examination. If you are within the basic level, you have an enormous amount of things to learn from. And if you're also within the secondary school level, you even have a greater chance to learn better on this channel. We have been discussing relationship between clauses. Clauses we have in sentences. What are the relationship between them? We've discussed so far the compound sentence. We've looked at what a coordinator is. We've introduced a subordinator in our discussion in complex sentence. Today's discussion is going to build upon our discussion on complex sentence. So we are going to have our lesson on complex sentence 2. Remember, we are building upon what we discussed in complex sentence the last time we met. Now let's go into today's lesson's objectives. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to 1. Distinguish between the use of a subordinator from a coordinator. 2. Construct complex sentences correctly. And 3. Appreciate the use of complex sentences in discourses. When we use discourses, we are just trying to refer to discussions, write-ups, passages, stories, dialogues. They're all termed discourses. Now let's go into the lesson. Subordination. Today we are going to introduce subordination as a continuation of our discussion on complex sentence. Generally, we use the term subordinate to illustrate that one entity, that's one particular thing, being it human or whatever, is under another. So you hear someone say, that's my superior. It means he or she is under that person. And you also hear someone say, that's my subordinate. It means that that person is also under him or her. So the term subordinate is not new to us as human beings in our daily interactions. At homes, we have the subordinate situation there, and we have a superior situation there. And I guess you do know at home, those of you who are subordinates and those of you who are superior, depending at the level at which you are looking at. Now, the subordinate doesn't have a complete authority on his own. This is what mostly happens in a relationship where we have subordinate relationship to a superior. We always realize that the subordinate doesn't have complete authority. The subordinate always takes authority from the superior. This is what we notice. At homes, those of us who are subordinate, we take instruction from the superior. In school, as we are in school, the subordinate ones take directions or information from the superior. So you do not have complete authority in what you do because you are supposed to account to someone. So the subordinate therefore depends on the superior for his work. So always the subordinate will depend on the superior for whatever he or she wants to do. So when subordination is spoken of in grammar, it refers to a context, a situation where a statement mostly a clause, does not give a complete meaning on its own. You see, from what we learned in the previous slides, the above slides, we did mention that the term subordinate in our relationship as human beings, as students, as workers, or even at home, subordinate doesn't have an authority on its own. Now we are bringing it lower to our level, to our discussion, to the English language. And what we are saying is that anytime we speak of subordinate in English grammar, we are referring to a situation where a clause doesn't give a complete meaning on its own because it has to depend on another superior clause to give a meaning. To stand on its own, it has to rely on one particular clause. So the subordinate clause gets its meaning from another clause within the sentence it occurs. So the subordinate clause gets its meaning from another clause within the sentence it occurs. This is what we've seen. Now, what we are saying is that the subordinate clause has its meaning coming clear by depending on another clause, as in the sentences we shall see. In sentence 1, we have the sentence that the building collapsed while construction was ongoing. The building collapsed while construction was ongoing. In sentence 2, we have the farmer lost all their crops when the floods occurred. Begin to identify the clauses that are subordinate. That's clauses that depends on the other to give meaning. I hope you are right. Now let's have our discussion. Let's identify them together. In sentence 1, the clause while construction was ongoing does not represent completeness as a perfect unit. Is it true? Let's look at it, the sentence 1. The building collapsed while construction was ongoing. That's sentence 1. And what we are saying is that the clause while construction was ongoing doesn't represent completeness as a perfect unit. Take it that one alone. Does it give complete meaning? Certainly not. While construction was ongoing. While construction was ongoing. So what happened? See, we'll be interested in what happened. So you realize that that aspect doesn't give a complete meaning as a perfect unit. Now, when the floods occurred in sentence 2, guess its completeness from the clause the farmer lost all their crops. Is that true? When the floods occurred, that clause in sentence 2, we are saying that guess its completeness from the clause the farmers lost all their crops. The farmers lost all their crops. Now, when we take when the floods occurred, it doesn't give sense on its own. It doesn't give complete meaning on its own. But linking it to the first part of that sentence, the first clause of that sentence, the farmers lost all their crops, you see that it makes sense. At what particular time did the farmers lose their crops? When the floods occurred. So when the floods occurred, it's subordinate to the farmers lost all their crops. While construction was ongoing, it's subordinate to the clause the building collapsed. So the words while and when were used to link the dependent clauses, that's the subordinate clauses, remember. In our previous lesson, we were using dependent clauses. And we are saying that dependent clauses are also termed subordinate clauses. So the words while and when were used in sentence 1 and 2 while was used in sentence 1 and when in sentence 2 to link the subordinate clauses with their respective independent clauses. So in sentence 1, we have while linking construction was ongoing to the building collapsed. In sentence 2, we have when the floods occurred, when linking the floods occurred to the farmers lost all their crops. When linking the floods occurred to the farmers lost all their crops. So those two words, while and when, have been used by the speaker to link subordinate clauses with their independent clauses or their superior clauses. So again, the subordinate clauses are not given equal rank, or when I say equal rank, equal importance like the independent clauses. Take note here. When we say a clause is subordinate, just as in human relationship, at work, at home, in schools, the subordinate doesn't have equal rank like the superior. In the same way in grammar, a situation where we have independent clause and a subordinate clause, or a main clause, independent main clause, and a subordinate clause, a situation where we have these two, what it means is that the subordinate clause doesn't have the same rank, the same importance in the meaning of the sentence like the main clause. That is the independent clause. Independent clause is main clause. Independent clause is main clause. Subordinate clause is dependent clause. So if you hear me say main clause, I'm referring to independent clause. If you hear me say subordinate clause, I'm referring to dependent clause. This explains why while and when were used to link the clauses with low rank with those of a higher rank. What we are saying is that since we have a subordinate clause and the meaning of subordination is that it doesn't have complete meaning on its own, it has to depend on other. It therefore means that the speaker doesn't give equal importance, equal rank to the two clauses. A main clause is of a higher rank than the subordinate clause. A main clause is of more importance in the eyes and in the interpretation of the speaker than a subordinate clause, lower rank. To do this, that is why the speaker used the words while and when, linking those two clauses in our previous sentences. So conjunction that is used to link subordinate clauses with main clauses or independent clauses is termed subordinate conjunction. Take note. Now you have a main clause, you have a subordinate clause, then you have a conjunction that is linking these two. Subordinate clause is of a lower rank than the main clause. So the word or the conjunction that is used to link these two clauses is called subordinate conjunction or a subordinator. So subordinators are of different kinds, just like coordinators. In our lesson under compound sentences, where we mention coordination or coordinators, we realize that we have different categories of coordinators. Some came from the family of addition, contrast, and the rest. In the same way that we do have subordinators coming under different classes or performing different roles in line of subordination. So we have the while and when as two examples. Try constructing sentences with different kinds of subordinators. We have quite a number of them. on your own. Have a subordinate clause, have a main clause, link them together by using a subordinator. This arises from the situation you find yourself and from what you are trying to express. Now you are speaking, you are the one writing. One aspect of your message is very important than the other. It all depends on the situation you find yourself. So when you are given one aspect of your statement a higher rank than the other, then subordination comes in. So you link these two by subordinator. So if we take our sentences over there, the building collapsed while construction was ongoing. We have the two clauses linked together by while. We have the two clauses linked together by while. Then we also have in the second sentence the floods occurred and then the farmers lost all their crops, linked together by when. It's the same similar sentences we expect you to construct sentences with. Now, let's look at the paragraph below and try in our own way to make deductions from them in relation to what we've learned so far. Haven't you another interesting story? Fuseni. Grandfather Kanga asked in a hoarse whisper. If you have, tell it. Tell it quickly. So in that group of sentences, in that paragraph, which of them, the sentences we have in that paragraph, which of them has a subordinator? Which of them do not have a subordinator? Pay attention for a while and just try to identify that. Then another paragraph. At the urgent prompting of the councillors, Fuseni launched into another story. And that's the story. Many harvests after the young man of the sack of salt had become king in the country of the wise, in reward for his great wisdom, a calamity overtook his kingdom. The great tree under which the king held court was struck by lightning in broad daylight and burnt almost to ashes. The king and all his people went into mourning, strewing ashes on their heads and abstaining from shaka for many days. This paragraph has different kinds of sentences. Among the sentences there, have you found a subordinator? Do you have a coordinator there? Fish out the subordinators you have. Take note, before you are able to say this is a subordinator or this is a coordinator, you should have clauses where these sentences have been linked by. Before you can say this is a subordinator or a coordinator, you should first of all have clauses linked by either the subordinator or the coordinator that you have identified. 5 moons after the cancer tree had been struck dead by lightning, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. The head cancer tree, let me take that again. 5 moons after the cancer tree had been struck dead by lightning, the people woke up one morning to see a strange sight. The dead council 3 was covered from its base to its topmost cured mouth with mushrooms, white and tasty mushrooms that were greatly valued as a delicacy in the country of the wise. Another paragraph. So in this paragraph, have you found subordinators? Have you found coordinators? Remember, besides when and while that we introduce as subordinators, we have other forms of subordinators. You'll be able to identify a subordinator when you have two clauses. One is dependent on the other. And then the two clauses where you have the independent one joined by a dependent one, the conjunction that comes joining these two clauses, dependent clause and independent clause, gives you what you have there as a subordinator. It is a subordinator that joins these two clauses, as an independent clause and a dependent clause, or a main clause and a subordinate clause. Then a coordinator will occur when you have two clauses. The speaker gives these two clauses equal ranking. Therefore, these clauses are certainly going to be main clauses or independent clauses. You have these independent clauses brought together in one sentence, and they can only be linked perfectly by what is known as a coordinating conjunction or a coordinator. So in that paragraph, have you identified any subordinator? Have you identified any coordinator? Do that. And then another paragraph. "Oh, my counselors," said the king, "what we once thought was a calamity was after all a blessing. We should show you that even the wisest men still have something new to learn before they die. Our council tree is dead, but if the tree had not died, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it?" Another paragraph having a series of sentences. Let's take that again. "Oh, my counselors," said the king, "what we once thought was a calamity was after all a blessing. We should show you that even the wisest men still have something new to learn before they die. Our council tree is dead, but if the tree had not died, how could we have all these delicious mushrooms now growing on it?" Your task is to identify the subordinators and the coordinators from the various sentences we have in that paragraph. Have you identified any subordinator and any coordinator? Again, if you have just joined us, our discussion is on complex sentences. And in a complex sentence, we have discussed coordination and what is known as coordinator. We have discussed subordination and what is known as subordinator. We've looked at main clause, subordinate clause, or independent clause and dependent clause, respectively. And what we are currently doing is identifying subordinators from the sentence we have under each paragraph, and also identifying coordinators from the sentences under each paragraph. Remember, subordinators will be used when you have a subordinate clause linked to a main clause, and coordinators will be used when you have two main clauses or more than two main clauses linked together. Another paragraph. Straight away, the king commanded that the people should prepare for a great feast. The women were ordered to put great pots on the fire and to hold themselves ready to cook mushroom soup for the king and all his wise men. Let's take that again. Straight away the king commanded that the people should prepare for a great feast. The women were ordered to put great pots on the fire and to hold themselves ready to cook mushroom soup for the king and all his wise men. Do we have subordinates or subordinate conjunctions in the sentences within that paragraph? Identify them. Do we have coordinators or coordinating conjunctions in the same group of sentences under that paragraph? If we do, identify them. Another paragraph. Then one wise man, who was acclaimed by all the people as one of the wisest men in the land because he nearly won a contest of the wise more than a generation back, came forward and posed this weighty question. How, O king, shall we get all the mushrooms safely to the ground without damaging them? Take that again. Then one wise man, who was acclaimed by all the people as one of the wisest men in the land because he nearly won a contest of the wise more than a generation back, came forward and posed this weighty question. How, O king, shall we get all the mushrooms safely to the ground without damaging them? Identify the coordinators we have in there and the subordinators we have also in that series of sentences under that paragraph. This is where time will permit us to be with you, and in our next lesson we shall have these same paragraphs where we analyze them into detail, putting all the things we have learned together in analyzing them. Until we meet you again, remember to revise on what we have studied so far. We've discussed compound sentences. We are discussing complex sentences. In relation to these two, we've looked at independent clause, we've looked at dependent clause, we've looked at coordination, and we've also looked at subordination. Hoping to meet you again next time on the same channel. Until then, we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.